You found yourself on another episode of Locked On Bulls. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the direction and the goals for the Chicago Bulls team heading into the 2024-25 season. We're going to talk about it all and more. But first, we got to play that intro.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls. Our guys know what it is, man. My name is Haize. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, man. You guys can follow me at CEO Haize. I am host and creator of Chicago Bulls and Chicago Bears Central YouTube pages and podcasts. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. With that said, man, let's go ahead and get into it for today, man. I want to start off talking about this. What are the Bulls' goals for the 2024-25 season? That is one of the biggest questions here left for the Chicago Bulls is what are their goals really? Now, we know that AK was non-committal at Media Day to talk about any type of win-loss, thing being the standard for the Bulls. Also kind of non-committal on if one of the goals, which was asked by It's the Bigs, I see you, Jay Capone. Asked, if one of the goals was keeping and protecting that top 10 pick for the Chicago Bulls. And this has been another thing that has kind of made some added questions for the Chicago Bulls. If you don't have a clear goal outlined, how do you know what to measure your team at? And I think, the Bulls' goals ultimately are development. And what comes through that development is what's going to kind of direct the Bulls' next goal, right? So I think when you look at this, and coming into the season, you have to really look at it as a couple of things are first, before we can even talk about keeping the top 10 pick, making moves to try to stay competitive, whatever that is, you first have to have the growth of the young players. And I think that is one of the most important things with this team, if you're talking about goals, is really seeing what you have in these guys, right? Start off with guys like Coby White, Ayo Dosunmu, who had really big steps up last season, to make sure that is legitimate, right? To see how they adapt to these new roles, but also making sure that they are going to be able to not only kind of match, but build on. Because I think a Coby White that takes his game even another step, whether it's offensively or defensively, right? I think, too often we look at players and we try to gauge how much they've improved by how many points per game added to their total, when it's not just about that. When you look at Coby White specifically, it's not only his ability to still score 19, 20 points per game. I mean, ideally, I think between 20 and 22 points per game is kind of where you would love to see Coby White this season. But even outside of that, can he do it more consistently, right? That's a big thing for Coby. The inconsistencies were there throughout Coby White's season, even with the amazing leap that he had last year, that there were inconsistencies there. And Coby White will be one of the first ones to tell you that, right? And then you also look at how the growth on the defensive side of the ball. Coby's grown as a more active defender over the last 2-3 years, really. He's steadily grown as being more active and engaged on the defensive side of the ball. But I think if Coby White can make that next step and really not only through the offensive output, but keep in mind, Coby White at one point last season was leading the league in charges drawn, right? So those type of things is really what you want to look at it for with Coby White. The assist numbers, those may go down because he's playing with Josh Giddey. The rebound numbers, I expect those to stay the same. Those may even could take a little bit of a rise, not just because of Josh Giddey, but, because of, him playing at that 2 guard could actually put him in a position to get more of those long rebounds and things like that. So seeing a Coby White that could step it up on both sides of the ball, be more consistent, I think is the key thing there, for example, with Coby White. You look at Patrick Williams. Can Patrick Williams command or demand a little bit more, right? Like just make Billy Donovan have to play you. So I think overall, when you're really looking at this, development is one of the key goals for the Chicago Bulls team, from Coby and Ayo, to build off what they did last year. Then you got a player like Patrick Williams that's just trying to show, can you add anything to your game while being a little bit more engaged? Can you now be somebody that Billy Donovan can't keep affording to not at least work into the offensive game plan? Now that comes to Patrick Williams and to Billy Donovan a little bit when it comes down to that. And then you're trying to see what you have from guys like Jalen Smith, a new acquisition for you, a guy that hasn't really played a whole lot of minutes in his NBA career, but his per minutes stats have been great. Theoretically, looking at on paper for Jalen Smith, if you play him more minutes, you have a pretty damn good backup center there, backup big, whatever you want to play him at the power forward or at the center position. And maybe there's some even starter level potential there from Jalen Smith. And that's what the Bulls are hoping to uncover there. And then, with Josh Giddey, you want to know exactly what Josh Giddey is going to be as your point guard going forward. Is he more like that the 2022-23 Josh Giddey, where he averaged 17, 7, and 6 basically, or is he more like what he averaged last year, which still is a player that can still be a potent part of your offense in leading that offense for the Chicago Bulls? But to know what caliber of player he is, I think that's it as well. And then you got the even younger guys. You got the Modest Bucilis in his rookie year. What does he show you? Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, do they start showing a little bit more for the Chicago Bulls as well, right? So I think right now, the thing that we can say adamantly is a goal for the Chicago Bulls team is to see what you have in the guys that are currently on your roster. Now, the different paths that can go is that if you do uncover something, let's say Kobe takes his game another step, Io takes his game another step, Josh Giddey comes in and fits in and is everything you want him to be, and then some of the other guys step up big time for you as well. If that puts you in a spot where the Bulls are competing for a playoff spot, then you kind of understand that direction. So I think the first couple of months of the season, October's a wash. You really don't get much play in October. But the first 2 full months of the season for the Chicago Bulls in November and December, that's where your long-term goals are going to start being set for the Chicago Bulls team, because you're going to start being able to see kind of where we are as a team and kind of how and where we sit, not only in the Eastern Conference, but in the development of our young guys. And so I think one thing that kind of went unsaid by me in my media day kind of reactions was Kobe White talking about how he talks to Dan Craig and Wes Unseld Jr. almost every day, right? These new assistant coaches that are coming in here that have been really big in player development over the course of their coaching careers. So now bringing that here to the Chicago Bulls, that's going to help kind of find your way along that path. And that's what the Bulls are trying to do. I think that's the immediate goal for the Bulls. Development, understanding what we have in these guys, and then how do we build off on that going forward? That's one of the key things, I think, for the Chicago Bulls. And then through that, the answers that you find in your development, the answers that you find in who Modest is, who Julian Phillips is, who Dalen Terry is, who Io, Jalen, and all these guys are, the answers that you find in that are then going to start forming what your long-term goals are. Meaning, isn't now that we feel like with a couple of key acquisitions, can we be right back to competing for a playoff spot? Or is it that, listen, we got some really nice young pieces here, they're developing, but we're far off from being anything close to actually competitive. But that then also takes a realistic outlook and view from AK, because AK has very much so preached competitiveness the last few years where the Bulls really haven't been competitive. Now, that could become from having an older roster, you want to compete, whatever it is. Maybe he'll be more apt to admitting, hey, we're far off from competing with a younger roster. All those things kind of play a part into that as well. And we'll see how that goes. But I think it just ultimately comes down to the first thing that the Bulls have to do before we can realistically set any type of long-term goals is see what you have on this roster. And that answer may be beneficial or may be something that you wanted. That answer could be, hey, these guys just aren't that good. Like, that really could be an answer. And that's the answer that I think is should be terrifying for Bulls fans. It should be terrifying for the front office, is that if you look at these guys and you say, Julian, Dalen, I'm not worried about Modest Bucilis right now in the rookie year making this determination, but Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, Jalen Smith, if those 3 guys, earn a lot but Tim, right, in a degree, if he even makes this final roster, if those young guys just aren't good, and you look at him much like the evaluation AK did of Wendell Carter and Chandler Hutchinson and those guys, if they're just not good, that's where we need to start worrying, right? Because at that point now, the new young foundation that you laid out for this team is just not something you can realistically build off on, and then you're stuck in the pits of hell. And that's what this Bulls team is hoping that they're going to be able to avoid. Now, for some Bulls fans, if you do find out those guys aren't good and this Bulls team is just legitimately bad next season, that's kind of the best case scenario, because a lot of Bulls fans want to be in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. Now, I think the Bulls are going to have a hard time truly being in those sweepstakes, but there's a lot of talent in next year's draft. It's more than just Cooper Flag. Next year's draft is talked about as one of the deepest in the last decade for a reason. Now, that depth doesn't mean all those guys are going to hit. The Bulls are still going to have to do their due diligence, but there's a lot of talent in next year's draft, and you don't want to necessarily just make it about Cooper Flagg, and that may be why the Bulls are in this place now where they're not necessarily prioritizing keeping that pick, but it's not that they're saying F that pick either. So that's a place that this Bulls team sits right now, and we're going to talk about next up, who are the players that could make that next leap for the Chicago Bulls? Who are the ones that we need to, and how can they realistically start making those leaps to kind of crystallize this picture for the Chicago Bulls heading into next season? So, but before we talk about that, we got to get into a message from one of our sponsors, and that is FanDuel. All right, Locked On Bulls fans and everydayers, man, you guys already know. We've been talking to you guys about FanDuel for a long time, and FanDuel has another great offer for you. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, live view, play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I can't stress to you guys enough why it is such a key thing to be able to look at games, stats, scores, play-by-play, everything on the exact same page that you can place your bets on. It streamlines that whole process for you in a way that not a lot of other betting sites do. So when you want to make an informed bet, when you want to make an informed decision, I know a lot of you guys are worried about your parlays. Hey, FanDuel got you covered. And so also with that, when you get started with FanDuel, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 guaranteed in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet. I mean, come on now. Who's giving you a deal like that other than FanDuel, man? I know some of y'all are struggling right now. You're hoping your parlays are going to hit so that you can afford your light bill next week. FanDuel's trying to give you a little extra edge up in that. $5 gets you $200 in bonus bets. So go to FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel.com to get that $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. All right, Bulls fans, guys, thank you so much for tuning in and sticking with us through here on Locked On Bulls, man. Make sure you guys go and check on Locked On NBA as well, man. Locked On NBA, where they have the 7 days a week coverage around everything with the NBA. The Locked On hosts give you all you need daily, which can also help you with your bets as well. But with that said, let's stick on our Chicago Bulls, man. The question next in this segment is who takes the leap this year? Last year it was Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu. I want to put some respect on Ayo's name because I think too often we talk just about Kobe as if Kobe was the only one to take a step. He definitely took a step up. But so outside of Ayo and Kobe, who I think going into this year, it's more about a refinement of what they were able to do last year. But I don't want to overlook them in this conversation either, because if Kobe White or Ayo Dosunmu take another step, a big step forward, listen, you got it's also going to get expensive because both those guys are free agents at the end of next season, but it's going to get very expensive for the Bulls, but that would be huge. But when you look at the next guys up to take a big step up, right? I'm going to put Jalen Smith in there, being only 24 years old. I still think that there is a way for him to step up in role, in minutes, and in production. So I am going to put Jalen Smith as a candidate here. Jalen Smith, Patrick Williams. Then you also have Dalen Terry, Julian Phillips, and Josh Giddey, right? I don't categorize whatever Modest Bucilis does his rookie year as a step. Now, if he comes in and somehow averages 19, 20 points per game, I'll come back here and be like, hey, I'm stupid. I should have said that he was going to make a step. But I'm not necessarily expecting that from a rookie, especially under Billy Donovan, with veterans still on this team. I think that Modest Bucilis is going to have a role, but I don't know if he's going to be fully unleashed or if he's even ready for it this year. And that's fine. It's not just about this year when it comes to Modest Bucilis, but these other guys need to start making a step. Patrick Williams is heading into year 5, right? That's where Patrick Williams is. Jalen Smith, much like Patrick Williams, still a very young player, but has been a player that's been around this league for a while now, and you want to see what he can do coming into it. And then you got Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, that I mentioned already. So who makes that next step for the Bulls? Let's talk about the case that 24-year-old Jalen Smith has to make that next step. He's been in the league. He was the top 10 pick in 2020. And what the growth of Kobe White showed me last season is that you can count nobody out. I just don't think you can count anybody out to make a leap at any point in time. Yes, we've been typically trained to look at it and say by year 3, but Kobe made that leap in year 5, right? And so Jalen Smith, who's coming into year 5 himself in the NBA, when you look at, I always go back to when he was initially traded to the Indiana Pacers. That was the only time he averaged over 20 minutes. And in that time, he averaged 13 points per game, almost 8 rebounds, a block per game as well. The dude absolutely, for what he did, 24 minutes a game, that's really good production. So what's the key for Jalen Smith to really take a step here for the Chicago Bulls? And this is the way that I look at it. If Jalen comes in here with a high up-tempo offense, a point guard that's going to get him lob opportunities, that's what I think both Ayo, Kobe, and Josh Giddey can all get him those opportunities. There is a path in Jalen Smith just being a guy who uses his length and athleticism and as well as his shooting prowess. Last year, a 42% from three shooter, taking 2.4 per game. If he can bring a combination of those skills that he has while still playing the weak side, the blocking defense that he can play, I think that we could see Jalen Smith take a step up next year. I'm not saying it's going to be the leap that like a Kobe White had, but I do think we can see Jalen go from a player that last year averaged 9.9 points per game in a bench role. He only started 14 games, played 61, averaged 17 minutes per game. I think that Jalen can get more towards 22, 25 minutes per game here on this roster because of his ability to play the 4 or the 5. He can play next to Vooch. He can replace Vooch. He can play next to P. Will. He can play next to Modest Bucilis. Jalen Smith, the key bench guy on this team is Ayo Dosunmu. But Jalen Smith is going to have an opportunity to be that next key bench guy for the Bulls. And because of that, I think just by staying healthy, being energetic, he's never played over 68 games. I need more than that from Jalen Smith this year. I need Jalen Smith to be between 70 and 75 games played this year. If he can do those things, I think just by the nature of the increased role and the guards that can get him the ball, on top of us being a team that can play more in transition, that's a key for Jalen Smith to really make a leap for this Bulls team next year. And I'm really looking forward to that. Then you have next up Dalen Terry. This is a guy that I really don't know what, if any, one thing it's about Dalen Terry. Like with like Jalen Smith, I could say spread the ball, be more energetic. Dalen Terry is going to be about just being the energy guy, being somebody who finds a way to impact that game every single night for Dalen Terry. And if he can do that, right, that's a nice step for a player that throughout his NBA career has the most he's averaged is 3.1 points per game and 11.5 minutes per game. I don't need Dalen Terry to all of a sudden be some knockdown shooter from three-point range or anything like that. I need Dalen Terry to just be that energy guy, the guy that just goes out and makes plays where you need him to be, much like Derrick Jones Jr. when he was here, right? How Derrick Jones Jr., whether it was blocks, whether it was key rebounds, whether it was a dunk every once in a while, he always found a way to impact the game. That's what I need to see from Dalen Terry this year. Just find a way to impact every game that you get into. And it doesn't have to be an amazing impact, but go out and make some plays for the Bulls. That's a key thing, I think, for Dalen Terry going into next year to really show that he's ready to make that next step. And the Bulls already picked up his fourth-year option, so he will be here again the season after this upcoming season. But I think that's a key thing for Dalen Terry there. Next up, Julian Phillips. Now, this is a guy that I am still really high on, Julian Phillips. It seems like some Bulls fans have kind of come down on Julian Phillips a little bit after the initial kind of excitement when the Bulls got him. But I think ultimately, like, this is a guy who was a second-round pick. This is a guy who was on pace and started playing a lot more games for the Chicago Bulls right before he went down. His minutes went up. His games played went up. All those type of things. He played 40 games as a rookie, right? And he was on pace under Billy Donovan to play about 50 to 55 games before he went down. So you look at how Julian Phillips' minutes went up month to month. He started off in October, 2.5 minutes, 2 games played. In November, 5.7 minutes per game. He played 5 games that month. Then you look at December. He went up 3 minutes per game. He played only garbage time. But then he took a really big leap in January. 13 minutes played per game for Julian Phillips in that time. And he averaged 5.5 points per game. He did that on 57% shooting from the field and 40% shooting from 3, right? So, again, not great numbers, but as a role player for the 13 minutes that he played, that's actually pretty good production. 13 minutes played again in March before he went down. His minutes came down in February, 9.7 minutes per game. But I think Julian Phillips has shown that he's somebody that Billy Donovan started trusting. When you look at him, 6'9". He's gotten up to 210 pounds now, has that versatility. I think the way that the Bulls are going to play, especially off the bench, can benefit Julian Phillips, but he's going to have to. He is going to have to play with tons of energy consistently and earn those minutes. They're not going to be given to Julian Phillips. He's going to have to earn those minutes, and we'll see if he can do that next season. But I think him being a guy that can do that three-point shooting, can get out in transition, can block some shots, right? I do look at a little bit more of a scoring opportunity. He has to hit open shots when he gets them. He already showed an ability, that fact that he isn't afraid to take shots, right? So that's a big thing for Julian Phillips, I think, as well, going into the season, and we'll see if he can build off on that. There's two more players that we got to get into and how they can make the step next year. But before we get into that, man, we got to take a brief break, and we'll come out on the other side and keep talking about players that can make a step up for the Chicago Bulls. All right, Bulls fans, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, man. We appreciate your support every single day, especially since on YouTube we converted the show to being a live show every single day, going down 11 a.m. Chicago time, 12 p.m. Eastern time, depending on where you are. We started it closer to 12:30 today, but that's because things in life were going on. But with that said, I want to finish the remaining players that can make that next step, take that next step next season for the Chicago Bulls. And the next one is Patrick Williams. And this Patrick Williams was a difficult one for me to kind of get exactly what I want to see from Patrick Williams next year, because it's not like this. I want to be clear here. Patrick Williams as the fourth option, which he's going to still be the fourth option on offense. He may even be the fifth option on offense. Being able to average 10 points on 40% shooting and 40% from three is really good production from a fourth option on offense. I get it. He was drafted fourth overall. We want to see a lot more for Patrick Williams, but when it comes down to it, I think that Pat has showed that as a fourth option, as a starter, he can be a starter on any team, kind of plug and play. But we want to see more from Patrick Williams. 23 years old now. No longer can you keep saying he's 22 years old. He's 23 years old coming into this season. He's heading into his fifth year. What needs to happen for Patrick Williams to take that next step? And I think it's just aggression. I know that not everyone agrees with me on this. With Patrick Williams, to me, it's him attacking rebounds, going after putbacks, right? If Patrick Williams just goes and crashes the glass, and I know he's not always going to be in position via how Billy Donovan has run this offense, but if he can attack the glass just a couple of times more a game and get those easy buckets, whether it's a putback or whether it's you got an offensive rebound and the defense is out of position, Patrick Williams can easily go from averaging 10 points per game to 14 points per game in nothing but energy. Now, the things that are out of his control, that's something that's in his control. The things that are out of his control is how much Billy Donovan runs plays for Patrick Williams. And I think that a Pat that is more aggressive, Billy Donovan will call more plays for. I also think us being a more up-tempo offense is going to help Patrick Williams because Pat is a decent passer. His ball handling has got better. He's a good three-point shooter. This is a guy that a more up-tempo offense at being that four for the Chicago Bulls actually offers a lot of advantages for Patrick Williams so that he can take off offensively. Defensively, I'm cool with where Patrick Williams is. The point that what we need to see from Patrick Williams to make a step is to stop being passive P, right? We don't need passive P this season. We need P Will, right? We need the Paul. We need that player to make himself known this season. And I think for Patrick Williams, it just comes with confidence. That's the key for Patrick Williams making the next step up is confidence for Patrick Williams, in my opinion. That's my personal opinion. The last player that we have to talk about as far as making that next step for the Bulls is the newest player that we acquired, and that is Josh Giddey. And Josh Giddey is an interesting case because one could say he already took his step, right? He already made a step. You go back and look at the 2022-23 season for Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey's stats were great. From a stat standpoint, 16.5 points per game. He did that on 48% shooting from the field, which is solid enough. 8 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game, 1 steal per game. Those numbers alone are really good damn numbers. The problem is he came down and went more back to his rookie year numbers. And so for Josh Giddey, it comes down to this. You're going to have the ball in your hands. Yes, you're still going to share some of that ball handling duty with Kobe White, maybe even with Ayo when he's in the game. But Josh Giddey just needs to make the players around him better. Point guardsmanship. That's what we need to see from Josh Giddey, in my opinion. If you see a season from Josh Giddey where he actually looks like he runs the offense and he is operating, because we've always known Billy Donovan's system looks much better when a point guard is playing at a high level. If he can do that, we'll see, man. We'll see. And ultimately, I think that Josh Giddey, for him to make that next step, he's going to have the best opportunity of any of these guys. And so to answer the question in this segment, who takes that next step? If I'm going to bet on anybody, it's going to be Josh Giddey. Who do I hope takes that next step is Patrick Williams. Because I tell you what, Patrick Williams, there's people behind you. I know I said it before, that are ready to take that spot and never give it back if they get it. Julian Phillips, Kenny Lofton. I'm only counting Kenny. I expect Kenny Lofton to be in the G League, but I'm throwing his name out there. Julian Phillips, Kenny Lofton, Manas Busilis. And I tell you what, I know I didn't put him on the list of players who could make that next step because he's a rookie. I tell you what, Manas Busilis has the type of mindset, the type of confidence, the type of will and determination that if you let that man taste being a starter in the NBA, you're going to have to pry from his cold, dead hands to get it back from him. Now, it's going to be a rough season for Manas Busilis defensively. I want to be clear here. I think Manas Busilis is going to get cooked defensively anytime a player isolates on Manas Busilis. But the thing is I think that's the best thing for him. With the type of confidence, with the type of mindset that Manas Busilis has, if you want him to grow as a defender, I think the best option for you is to watch him get cooked, because he's not going to take that too much. He's going to look at himself in the mirror after games and be like, hey, yo, did I just get cooked today by Brandon Ingram? It's not going to happen next time. It's not going to happen next time. So, listen, I hope that Patrick Williams does make that next step, because if he doesn't, there are going to be a lot of questions around that. Now, before we go today, I wanted to talk to you guys about one last topic, and this one came from a Joe Cowley article. Now, Joe Cowley is also the guy that asked directly during Media Day if the Chicago Bulls were looking to move off of Zach LaVine, and AK told, it was like, come on, Joe. Like, he literally said, come on, Joe. And Joe decided to take that back and go in and write an article that very same day that said that the Bulls are still exploring Zach LaVine trades. Direct quote, Joe Cowley, Chicago Sun-Times, the Bulls are continuing to actively explore deals involving LaVine. Here's what I'll say on that. Shout out to my Pat the Designer long pause. Here's what I'll say on that. I think that the Bulls are always going to be listening to deals. That includes Zach LaVine. That includes Nikola Vucevic. Hell, for all I know, that can include everybody on this roster. If you got a face, you could be traded, right? So that's not a shock that the Bulls, but to say that they're actively exploring deals, right? That word actively, I would say this. At this point, if you hear any Zach LaVine trade details or trade rumors between now and January, don't believe them. Now, after January, I do think things can start changing for Zach LaVine if he's playing well. But right now, I think the Bulls are, and I think they should be committed to seeing what they have in this roster. That's what I honestly think should be happening right now. We'll see. Rumors, that's going to come with the game. It's going to come with it. It is what it is. But listen, Joe Cowley is the biggest hack in Chicago Bulls writing. I'm going to tell y'all right. You guys know me and Pat, when Pat was here, we don't rock with Joe Cowley. So I wanted to use this platform in this time to point out to everybody, if somebody is telling y'all that the Bulls are actively shopping Zach LaVine right now, stop it. Stop it. I think the Bulls are content right now to seeing what they have on this roster, and then they're going to let that dictate what happens next for this team. I think that's the right decision to make as well. I mean, if I'm being 100% honest with you, I think that is the right decision for this team to make with where they sit right now. Because that is just, and Joe Cowley was also the one that updated, like, he was the initial one that talked about Zach LaVine and Rich Paul. Like, if you go back and look, and I mean, don't just look at like Bleacher Report's reporting or whoever else. If you go back and look throughout most this offseason, most of the Zach LaVine rumors stemmed from Joe Cowley articles, and then other people took out and put elsewhere and put their own spins on it. It just is what it is. I'm not saying that Zach LaVine can't be moved this year. In no way am I saying that. But I'm saying that right now, man, come on, y'all. Joe Cowley, Bloggable, diehard Chicago Bulls fan, all these guys, Like, and I hate to say that, I've been reading Blogger Bull since I was about 22 years old. I'm 37 years old. And I hate to see what Blogger Bull has become. I hate to see what Blogger Bull has become. Stop it. Just stop it. Just stop it. Just stop it right now. Just stop it. So that's my thoughts. That's what we're going to end the show on, y'all. Thank you guys so much for tuning in live. Like I said, you guys can catch Locked On Bulls live Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Chicago time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. That's what it is right now. I appreciate you guys so much for the support that you continue to give this show. We're going to bring on some guests later on in the week. I'm working on getting a couple of people on, so make sure you guys stay in tune and locked in with us on that one. But I appreciate you guys so much. Make sure you guys go and check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network as well. We got great shows no matter who you're a fan of a team or if you do stuff like me. Like, if you're only a Bulls fan, what I like to do is I like to go listen to some other Locked On shows of who our opponent is. So, yeah, I mean, check that out. So, thank you guys for tuning in, man. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Love you guys. Go Bulls. All that good stuff. See Red, y'all. Peace.